I'm reflecting on some of my regrets, or maybe the one biggest regret I've had actually in one of my other podcasts. But how do you, with much more experience again around decision making, think about it, or you would like people to think about it?
I love the book, The Power of Regret, as you noted. I think it's fantastic. And I think this idea of knowing what the most common regrets are can be really instructive. And knowing that people don't regret the chances they took, they regret the chances they didn't take, right? And so, always this idea of, yes, and I'm somebody who's not necessarily a risk seeker. I'm not risk averse, but making the leap from the corporate world to the world of entrepreneurship was super scary, right? I gave up health insurance. I gave up a stable paycheck, status, like all of this stuff. But I knew that if I didn't do this, that I would always regret not giving it a chance. And I knew that the research backed me up on that. And that plus using my framework, feeling good about the process that I followed to make the decision has helped me take that leap in a way that I can really say I don't have regrets about. So I think regrets are very instructive. I certainly don't think we should all strive to live lives of no regret because I think that's impossible. But I think the idea is how can you learn from the regrets you've had, plus the research out there about regrets for the next decision you have to make.
I love that and love you mentioning just that transition. Somebody smarter than me said there's like the addiction of the corporate world, like the worst drag is to seeing that money come into your paycheck. And then when it's not there and you get on the entrepreneurial path, there's even like the mindset shift associated with that. Can you share a little bit more, if you're open to it, the 5C framework, and then how it helped you personally to jump into the entrepreneurial world, because that decision is super hard for many, including myself. I've always have so many ideas of what I could create, and for whatever reason I haven't fully unleashed, I guess, my entrepreneurial spirit. Maybe one day I will grow out of it and take a leap and be as courageous as you are, Abby. But I'm curious sort of how that helped you navigate your decision.
I'll run through the framework quickly and I'll maybe use a couple of the C's to highlight the steps that were most meaningful for me. So the first C is to clarify what's most important to you. The second is to communicate with the person or people most involved in the decision. The third C is to consider a broad range of choices. Few decisions are either or, and by expanding the consideration set, you have a higher likelihood of making a good decision. The fourth C is to check in with friends, family, and trusted resources. And the fifth C is to examine the consequences of your decision across different time horizons, the short term, medium term, and long term consequences.
And I've actually used it, funny enough, for my last job decision. I've kind of gone through all of the Annie's books. I think I've listened to 3, tried to find a framework, and then I came across your webinar where you shared this. I was like, okay, let me try to plug this in and see how I can decide which is the job. And funny enough, I was pretty good on the clarify, communicate the choices and sort of the consequences. And for me, it was the check in that then decided, which I haven't much used historically, but I've checked in with few advisors and mentors and people I've been privileged to have around in my life that had a much more accomplished career than me. And that actually swayed me in the direction that I'm at now.
Hmm.
But yeah, how has that worked for you?
It's so interesting. Well, and it so speaks to your point about decisions being so personal and everyone's process is so different because I am like famous for the being good at the check-in step. And so sometimes I
Mm.
think I've over-indexed on the check-in and let other people dictate a little bit too much my decisions. And so some of the things that I've had to learn a little bit more is to trust myself, like check in with my own intuition more than with trusted mentors or published studies. So I think it's very personal. But when it comes to all of these big life decisions, I think the hardest part and the most important is the clarify step. And for me, it wasn't one clarifying moment, but there was a series of moments that helped me clarify what was important to me. One was I ended up getting recruited for a similar job at a bigger, more prestigious company and went through the whole interview process and then found out I was one of 2 finalists. I didn't get the job. And interestingly, instead of being disappointed, I was very relieved. And so that was a moment to check in with my gut and say, like, that's interesting information. It's not about continuing on this path. I had also long held an entrepreneurial aspiration. In fact, I wrote about it in my business school essay many years before. And so it was this idea of this risk that I, had kept putting off. I mentioned these different life quakes I'd been through. Well, one of the things that happened as I was writing and publishing the book is that my mom ended up passing away. And that was a moment where she had an accident many years before and her last day of work before retirement. And so I think for us, we're so trained to think about, well, maybe I'll do the responsible thing and work, really hard. And then after I retire, I can do what I want. And I just saw this experience with her where she actually loved her career. She would say, I can't believe they pay me to do this, to work with kids and help them foster a love of reading. But she did not have this opportunity to pursue all the things she was interested in outside of her job until after she retired because, she had this accident. And that was a clarifying moment to say, I don't want to wait until it's too late to take this risk. And there were some other moments, but the clarify step, it started to get very clear to me that I wanted to pursue something entrepreneurial. Interestingly, my husband also wanted to pursue something entrepreneurial at the same time. And we first felt like, well, that's not really financially possible.